so. Can you see my first slide?
Indeed, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And I know that you've got 750 more. Is that right?
That's right.
Wonderful.
But they're in reserve.
Let's go for it.
Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. Now, hopefully, most people attending have some interest in United Nations sustainability goals. But if you don't, the good news is that many of the messages I'm going to give here apply to planning of IT projects and especially setting objectives and clear requirements for value. So you can pick up a lot of good ideas, even if you're not interested in United Nations sustainability goals. The slides, if you want them, if you use the photograph, the QR right here, you quickly get these slides, and there's the link. There are some, my own email, my website, and I'm bragging about a couple of books, what I wrote right there. But pushing right on, let's see, there we go. Okay, so there's our list of subjects, not to worry about it, they'll be introduced one by one. I'm both a Norwegian and American citizen. You can't choose where you're born, but you can choose where you live, as I say, and Norway is a pretty good place to live, have to admit. And they designed the Security Council at the United Nations. That's a painting done by a Norwegian, and Norway is on the Security Council together with Britain this year. And thought I'd just brag about little Norway a little bit there. Okay. Actually,
don't tempt us too much. There's a £5,000 penalty if we try to join you there.
Oh yes, right. Forgetting and right. Actually, when I first came to Norway in '58, I met a man. I joined IBM, and I met Thomas Watson Jr., the chairman, who happened to take a sailing trip to Norway and came and met the staff. That was kind of fun. But he brought with him a guy called Trygve Lie, which I'm sure none of you have heard of, but he was the first Secretary General of the United Nations. And he was also the chairman of the board of IBM in Norway. So that was 1958. Anyway, moving right along. So a lot of organizations and corporations, and organizations include government organizations. For example, Norwegian government ministers walk around with a little UN Sustainability Goals badge on their lapel. So I don't know what the situation is in Britain with that, but presumably there's some buy-in to it. But there's buy-in, everybody's talking about it. And a friend of mine suggested that I take a look at it. And I took a look at it, and not surprisingly, the goals are visionary, as they should be, but they're not quite as clear as we need to deliver systematic value in an IT system that's somehow a part of it. So that's what this talk is all about, is how to take the visionary United Nations goals and turn them into something that's measurable, testable, clear, and transparent, and all that kind of thing. Okay. So here is the international symbol almost of the 17 goals. And what I'm going to say, I'm going to talk about probably number 1, 7, 8, and 9 with specific examples. But what I'm going to say applies to all the goals. They all have the same planning and visionary technology from United Nations, which, by the way, not surprisingly, resembles the visionary goals that your top executives of your company or organization might state. In other words, a lot of very nice sounding words to inspire, to set direction. But unfortunately, as we shall see, those words are highly ambiguous, and they're not, you can't really derive test cases for them. You can't really be sure that anybody's agreed on anything, because everybody has their own personal misinterpretation of the goals. And that's really the subject of the talk, how to get from vision to testable reality. Okay, so yeah, Now, all 17 UN goals might somehow apply to your organization. That is, they might choose to do something with respect to any one or several of the goals. Here is number 7, affordable and clean energy. And with a lot of nice sounding words, you must make sure everyone has access to clean, reliable energy, especially from renewable sources. Well, yes, please, we'll have some of that. Now, the problem is that statements like this cannot usefully serve for serious planning of, say, an IT system, or maybe something even bigger involving more than IT for your organization. They just aren't clear enough. So basically, if your organization has decided to wave the flag and say, we believe in this, then somebody is going to have to translate these nice visions to exactly what are you going to do, and exactly how will we know that it's done? How can we test that it's delivered? And that's what the talk is about. Basically, we have to go from nice sounding, highfalutin visions to, and let's put it in very simple terms, everybody knows what a SMART goal is, where the M is for measurable, for example. But basically, we're going to go for something that many people call SMART goals. And we have to do a little bit of enterprise architecture, and we have to find specific architectural strategies for reaching the goals. And I believe we have to be able to measure how good those strategies are for reaching the quantified, measurable goals we're going to have. Okay, so UN visions need work by analysts, business analysts, to be clear for our purpose. That's really the theme of the talk here. Now, you're going to see a lot of busy slides like this, and don't worry too much about them. No, I'm going to use 30 to 60 seconds on them, and that's not enough time to absorb them all. I've gone through the whole talk, and after the busy slides, I've put a simplified slide. So there's a simplified slide coming up. And then later, maybe if you want to, you can go back. And we also have, you'll see at the end of it, we've actually held some longer talks, which are recorded, both BCS and other organizations, which go into great detail about these things. And you're going to get a detailed book on the subject. So don't try to absorb all the detail, just pick up the main points, and I'll stress what the main points are. So here's goal 7 at the top level: ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. Okay, now, fine, but how would you test that? For example, how would you test that we have ensured, and what kind of access, and how affordable, and how reliable, and how sustainable, and what kind of modern energy? So, in other words, ambiguous words all over the place, making it impossible at this level to know exactly what strategies and architecture we have to put into place, and to know how to test that we've delivered it and be sure we've done the right thing. Now, here is an example of me taking basically the whole sentence and working on it to make it more a SMART goal. I'm using my planning language, okay? And you'll be seeing little bits of language here and there, and you can get whole books on it for free, like competitive engineering and several other things I'm going to give you links to. But taking the term modern energy, what I've done is I've put that in a scale of measure, which is here it is, energy recipients, blah, 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 and modern energy is part of that scale of measure. The problem is then, what is modern energy? And what I've done is I've defined modern energy as a set of things: electricity, gasoline, petrol, diesel, wood, and manual generation of energy, right? So one way of defining ambiguous terms is to define them as a set of other terms. And These terms are called conditions, and modern energy is a parameter. This is a scale of measure, and there are several parameters there, and one of them tackles the UN term, modern energy, and turns it into something slightly more concrete. Okay, now I know that's a lot. I sometimes use on the BCS courses at least one day teaching how to do this, and actually I've only got a few minutes, so don't worry if you don't understand it all, but let's just say I'm definitely taking the UN terms and pinning down the definitions, okay? So modern energy then is an example of a UN term. It needs definition that it's equal to A and B and C. Those are different classes of modern energy. And maybe for our project, we need to select, say, one of these, like solar energy or sea energy, depending on what we're doing, and go with that. And these then become specific definitions of our local interests. It's not all kinds of modern energy, but it's maybe only solar energy if you're working for, say, Elon Musk or somebody like that. One of the conditions of good planning is that you should be able to review your suggested plan. This is then a requirement definition using language. But before you review it, you should try to make it clear enough to review. You can't really review one sentence with 10 ambiguous things. You can just say, that's highly ambiguous. We can't review it. We can't understand it. So here I've written down some conditions for review. And in simple terms, the thing you review has to be crystal clear. And here is an example of trying to do that using the planning language, okay? So, enough of that for the moment. The simple idea I'm trying to get to across to everybody is before we can review and maybe approve our local requirements, we need to translate, say, the UN language so that it is complete, precise, intelligible, useful, and a few other things. Maybe if you prefer the acronym SMART, that's good enough for my purposes. Okay. Now, there we go. Let's see my Zoom thingies covering top here. How can I get rid of it? Okay, anyway, UN Principle 8. Okay, so decent work and economic growth. Okay, after COVID times, many people need decent work and many nations need economic growth. And here's a whole lot of UN style visionary statements. I don't say management BS and I don't say blah, blah, blah. I call them, and they are intended as visionary statements. And if we buy into them, we still have to, say exactly what we're going to do with our corporate systems or our IT systems. And I'm trying to give you some instruction on what you might do. You probably know this fellow here, my buddy Al. And I was quite amused that he observed problems we still have today. He died about 1954. Perfection of means and confusion of ends seems to characterize our age. Let me translate this because it still applies to our age. We're awfully good at specifying the strategies and designs we're going to use. And if we say, well, what's that for? Oh, well, we want higher security. Well, wait a minute. What do you mean by higher and what do you mean by security? That's confusion of ends. Now, the United Nations sustainability goals are ends, okay? And what if you take a look, now here are some goal number 8, specific, right out of the United Nations website. Now, if you start reading this text, you will discover that every one of these is a mixture of ends and means. In other words, the United Nations is specifying the strategies, the designs, the architecture. Okay, well, very helpful of them, except maybe that's not such a good idea. But they're also specifying the objectives, the goals, the targets, the ends, but vaguely. Well, actually, here's one number, 7%. That's pretty good. Okay. Now the problem is, if you've got highly ambiguous goals and nobody's quite sure of what it means, and you haven't yet taken the time and trouble to quantify and structure those goals, then in fact you logically cannot decide which strategies fit. It's impossible. Okay, so there's a basic rule I'd like to teach everybody, because everywhere I go we have this problem. Every business I work with, it seems to be taught at business school. You know, you cannot and should not mix your ends and your means in the same sentence. State your ends, then clarify them, then hand those clarified, approved, quality controlled, reviewed ends to your enterprise architects and say, find me some architecture that will get me to my ends. Now, okay, so here's the summary of that. Please do not include your idea of a strategy or architecture or whatever you want to call it mixed in with your future improvement objectives. Leave the architecture to the architects, not to some UN bureaucrat or top manager who thinks he knows what the technical solutions are, maybe because some supplier has whispered in his ear, this is the right architecture. Leave, you need to decide what your objectives are, and you need to do it in cooperation with a gang called stakeholders, of which there are many, okay, say 50 for a medium-sized project. This goes way beyond users and customers' ideas. And they have values, they value certain things. And we need to translate the values that the stakeholders have and decide which ones our projects are going to work on and clarify them. All this is quite simply clarifying the, if you like, the requirements of our projects. Then and only then hand it to the architects and say, find me the technology that will give the best value for money for this project. That's my pitch there. Now, same slide, except I've taken the trouble to read through everything, and in bold, I've actually put what I would call strategies, okay? In other words, you see these three contain, not in bold, achieve higher levels of economic productivity through, in other words, by means of, and now here comes somebody at the UN's idea of a strategy. Now, the problem is that could be a perfectly good idea, but it also could be a perfectly wrong idea, an idea which is too expensive or takes too much time or doesn't deliver enough of the kind of value you need locally in Derbyshire, okay? So it's a very bad practice to actually specify the means by which we expect to deliver it at, for example, the UN level. The UN sustainability goals should do exactly that. They should specify the sustainability goals, not mixing them up with a sustainability strategy. A very bad practice, not only for the UN, but I'm afraid managers do this all the time in their PowerPoint presentations. And I'm working with one corporation right now trying to stop them doing that. So that's the way of the world. Okay, so the summary here is mixing ends and the ways to get to the ends is a frequent bad practice. You risk getting what somebody asked for, but that might not be the most cost-effective strategy. You cannot know logically if it's good enough or not until you've quantified and clarified your requirements. And that isn't done typically here. Oh, another busy slide, but it's a really interesting and simple principle. If you learn nothing else this evening, I hope I can teach you something I've invented through simple observation. It's called link words, okay? Now, if you read these sentences, also United Nations Goal 8, and here, let's look at this one. Helping people cope with adversity. Well, we definitely want to do that through social protection and basic services. Well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Except is social protection and basic services the only way of helping people cope with adversity, right? And the answer is no. I can think of 25 other ones. Okay. So what we've got is, again, an example of a gratuitous strategy with a not very well-defined visionary idea helping people cope with adversity. Now, notice this little word through, okay? And notice the word through and policies work for and investing in and are connected by, okay? I call these words link words. Oopsie. I call these words link words because they link the ends with a suggested means. In other words, by simply scanning a text and looking for link words, you can say, aha, gotcha. You have both ends and means in the same sentence. And Tom has been trying to teach us this is a bad idea. Okay? Maybe it's okay at the visionary level, but you know, it's nice to have some suggestions. I really wish they wouldn't even do this at the visionary level. I wish they had a separate little box saying United Nations Sustainability proposed suggested optional strategies. And you can go pick these up if they're good, right? We really need to get the objectives and goals done well and really not mix them in here as though they were a given, as though we had to do them according to the UN, because that's not true. We do have to help people cope with adversity, but if we've got much more cost-effective ways of doing it in our local situation than social protection and basic services, then we should use the strategies that best help people cope with adversity, okay? Maybe at the lowest taxpayer cost. Anyway, long story short, I'm trying to teach the idea that you can use this as a parlor trick when any slide gets up there from the managers. The moment you spot a link word and start saying, aha, on the one side of the link word is an objective and the other side of the link word is a strategy. The objective isn't clear, therefore the strategy shouldn't even be there, okay? And this needs clarification first. Then maybe a professional designer or enterprise architect can pick up the suggested strategies from the UN and throw them away if they've got better ideas, okay? Ideas that help people better cope with stronger adversities at lower costs, okay? And this just ain't the only gang in town. Okay, game in town, I meant to say. So the summary of this is that you need to, here's a simple, you know, get some improvement by, and that's our link word, some kind of nice idea. Now, the moment you spot that construction, say, bad idea, we need to clarify this. We need to hand the task of deciding if this nice idea really is the best nice idea to a professional designer or architect, not to a UN bureaucrat who does not know our local situation and possibilities, okay? And so link words signal bad objectives mixed with strategies. Nice idea. Try it out. It's all over the place. And I've never seen it taught or mentioned in any literature, but it's there. Now, here's a development goal, 8.2. And here it is, achieve higher levels of economic productivity, right? Okay, good idea. Through, what's that? Link word. And we've got some great ideas coming up. Diversification, kind of fuzzy. Technological upgrading. Oh, that's us. We're the IT people. Innovation. Oh, we can do that. So again, and by the way, achieve when? For whom? Higher. How much higher? Levels of economic productivity. Oh, what kinds of productivity? And what kinds of economic productivity? See? Ambiguity all over the place. So this thing needs a bit of help here. I've begun to work on it using language. I give it a scale of measure, percentage of productivity levels for sectors. And I've got to define different productivity levels, trying to really define this concept here. And sectors, I'm going to try and define who's going to get this achieved for them. And here are some definitions of sectors, okay, or some, yeah, and then here's a goal. The goal is 42% in the year 2030 for productivity levels, gross national product, and sectors high value added. See, so in very simple terms, here is language trying to get a well-structured, quantified, little bit clearer objective before we get out there and say, all right, let's take a look at the diversification strategies and the technological upgrading strategies and the innovation strategies, of which there are quite a lot. And some of them are very local, or some of them are the specialties which our organization or our corporation is going to deliver to help the UN goals. So what's all this about? Well, we need to remove the strategies and clarify the objectives. So here symbolically is a clarified objective. And then we can feed these clear agreed upon objectives. Let this be a symbol at a quantified, structured objective. And we feed it to a design process. Let's call them enterprise architects for the moment. And they decide on architectures which will give us 42% by 2030 of the productivity levels that we specified in terms of GNP and the other things, okay? I hope I'm not going too fast, probably going too slow. I plan, by the way, for information to spend about an hour, not much more. And then no matter whether I finish the lecture or not, I'll leave you with the slides and we'll just open up for questions and answers the last half an hour of the session. I was offered 90 minutes and I declined it. I don't think you could stand listening to me that long. But let's see. Okay, so the next question, does your organization have clear sustainability goals? Now, I'll bet they don't, because what I found is most organizations, every time I look at them, do not have any clear goals at all for anything in IT or the rest of their organization. This is like the human condition. Management BS is the norm. And how to make clear goals, that's something people haven't mastered. And we have to master it. Our top level of critical stakeholder values, objectives, we have to learn to make them clear. And I'm afraid most people, whatever their education or intelligence, still need to learn to do it. Okay. Now, again, we have a lot of BCS training and BCS lectures, which are videoed, which go into detail on my part, how to do it. And we're going to refer you to various books and videos and things, giving you some idea of how to tackle it here in very simple terms. If you need to find a scale of measure to begin to make values clear. That's the simple thing, but not everybody knows how to do that or believes it can be done. So the UN sustainability goals are not like, they themselves are not clear every time we look at them. And so they're no more clear than the rest of your IT goals and the rest of your organizational goals. So you have your work cut out for you to make them clear. And simply declaring that the UN goals on your website are what we do, that's just wasting everybody's time. Or let's put it more nicely, that commits you to figuring out exactly what you're going to do for those UN goals. So if somebody asks you the tough question, exactly what are you doing for the UN goals, you should be able to answer that question. We're going to deliver this much of this and that by the following time. And we're going to have, you need a scale of measure for each one of the goals that you adopt. The UN goals, they're too vague. You have to interpret and define them for your own organization, tailor them, and certainly make a clear separation between the goals that you're going to go for and your local IT architecture or enterprise architecture, and what kind of money you're going to spend on it, what you're going to spend on the architecture. Okay. Here's a nice little framework okay? The ends, that's the goals, the objectives. The ways, which are also known as strategies, also known as the how, and the means, which are the resources. See, sometimes I say the means and I sort of mean the strategies with their costs, but it's very nice that they've divided this into the ways we're going to do it and the means needed to buy the ways and or purchase them. And then these two things, means make the ways possible, the ways make the ends possible. Very nice little picture there I picked up recently. Okay. Now, here's another part of Goal 8, promoting social cohesion and investing in community-led resilience and response systems. Okay. Now, one way of analyzing any statement like this, very simple, just simply count the number of ambiguous words or terms. And ambiguous means that you realize that different people could interpret this differently, no matter what the intent of the United Nations is. Okay, what does it mean to promote? If you can't think of at least two different interpretations, you don't have much imagination. What about social cohesion? Well, here's a little diagram I pulled out that shows that social cohesion is a complex thing with many aspects to it. Which is it possible that some people would think of this aspect and other people would think of that aspect because they're all part of social cohesion. So social cohesion's clearly an ambiguous term, okay? And investing, wait a minute, who's going to invest? How much are they going to invest? They're going to invest time or money or what? Clearly very ambiguous. Community-led, wait a minute, who in which community is going to lead how? Oh my God, ambiguous. Resilience, now that's a good word. Wait a minute, here's a whole book on building and measuring community resilience. Well, if it's so simple, you can't write a whole book on it, can you? Okay, so I count 7 ambiguous words in this one UN statement. Now, fine, as a vision sounds nice. As a vision, I want to buy into it, and so does my corporation. But in practice, our corporation is going to solve all the variations of all the words here for the whole world. So we have to pin down these terms and say, what are we going to do specifically? What, how are we going to promote? What kind of social cohesion are we going to deal with? What kind of investment are we talking about? What kind of resilience are we talking about? On and on and on, okay? So perfectly good, real example. Now, by the way, if you have a sentence of about 10 words and you count the ambiguous words and you get 7, well, this is useless for practical implementation of IT systems. It is not useless for the purpose of United Nations sharing a vision and getting people motivated to deal with it. And that's their job. But our job is to decide what we're going to do. And even one ambiguous word is bad enough. It can screw up your whole IT project. 7, you're doomed if you don't do something about it. You have no hope of doing anything useful except having a big IT project that fails. Question was, how do you integrate your local subset of sustainability goals into your IT projects? Now, in very simple terms, if this is a real example, it's actually the Department of Energy in the UK analyzing their risks in Brexit using my methods. But if 1 to 7 were some goals and 1 and 2 were UN goals, my simple thing is you need to pull in the UN goals and integrate them together with any and all other goals you might have that are not UN goals. That's a simple answer. And then based on this set of, say, 7 objectives, which are of course quantified somewhere, we pull in different strategies, and we pull in strategies to satisfy the UN goals, but we also pull in strategies to satisfy the other goals. So this is the set of, if you like, enterprise architecture. And then using what I call an impact estimation table, we can try to rate the power of each of these strategies. 0 means no power, gives us nothing. 15 means we get 15% of the way to our goal, okay? And a minus 15% would mean a negative side effect, it's hurting our goal. And so we can see that there's a set of ratings on for each one of the strategies on all of our goals, the UN goals and the other goals. And we can use this set of numbers to evaluate how powerful and how much should we prioritize each one of these strategies. Okay, now that's a lot. It usually takes us on the BCS courses at least one whole day to explain what this table is doing. So don't expect to get too much of it right now. But the books we're offering you for free will explain it in detail. And we've got plenty of BCS videos on the subject too. If you even said, goodness me, a table that helps me analyze all of my strategies and all of my goals, including the UN goals, and these might be some of the UN strategies that were thrown in for free, okay, then I hope that interests you. At the Department of Energy, they found that this way of presenting their very complex problem of what do we do with Brexit, will the lights still be on? They could get really a very complex set of relationships on one single page, and detail about everything was in the background there. You could drill down exactly how is this specified, exactly how is this number arrived at, etc. Enough of that. Hope I've introduced the impact estimation table to you. What impact estimation does, it says, look, here's a scale of measure of something I want to achieve. Here is how good I want to be. So I have to have enough strategies to get to how good I want to be. Here is some particular design or architecture, and I've rated it at 60% on that table. So here's how good it is. It gets me about halfway to my goal, which is great, except it's not great enough. I need additional architecture or design to get me all the way to my goal. Even if I have to throw away this and find a better one that gets me all the way, or find a supplemental strategy which added to this one gets me all the way. So graphically, we're looking at how do we define design? And design is something you do so as to move towards your future improvements, your higher qualities, your higher values on a scale of measure for some given functionality. Okay, now, here's an overview of some planning we did at BCS course in central London. We decided to tackle a student project of reducing congestion and air pollution in London. Okay, the answer was incredibly simple, but we didn't know it at the time. Spread COVID and London will have clean air. Ha, ha, ha. That was the great strategy. Anyway, here we have some stakeholders on the first day, or first phase of study. Then on the first day, we also find a set of objectives like air quality, and we quantify them. And then on the second day, we find a number of strategies which we believe will give us all these objectives. So many stakeholders, many objectives, many strategies. And then I also teach the idea of take a big strategy that would take 1 year to implement and decompose it into sub-strategies, maybe only taking 1 month apiece, and make sure that each one of these would deliver value and is independent of the others. Now we can prioritize any one of these that delivers the highest value and do it in a month, and then find the next one and do it in a month. What is this? It's called Agile, in case you didn't recognize, and each one of these becomes a sprint at delivering a value stream, which is very popular. At least we give lip service to the idea of delivering a value stream. And the measurement of the value stream is the measurement of you know, how it goes with the air quality and allergies and clean air inhalation, etc. Now, what this is if you like, an overview of a working process, which we've been teaching at BCS, sponsored always by the specialist group on quality. Thank you so much, Margaret. And we actually, in a 2-day course, usually we teach most of this, and including an impact estimation table towards the end, and teach people these structures and these methods. One of the messages here is we need to take a systems view, even if we are IT. Systems view means things like we need to know all of the critical stakeholders, and we need to know all of their critical values. And we might at some point say, we're only going to do the IT bit. That's fair enough. But then somebody else has to do the non-IT bit. Okay. And, you know, not all problems in the universe are like COVID or pollution are solved by a good IT system. And we need to document and keep track of the different, you know, all the stakeholders, all the objectives which are quantified, and then all the design strategies, whether they be IT or not IT. And I'm showing you a process of keeping track of, you can keep track of these. I like to keep track of things digitally, maybe on a spreadsheet. And now we have several apps that are helping us keep track of things. Here, by the way, for that same air quality in London is the different objectives that the BCS students did. You can begin to see that they have 2 numbers, how bad we are and how good we wish to be in the future. And if we drill down, we'll see the scale of measure and other things in addition. But this is just an overview table. And then, let me see. Here are various strategies that the students found. And then at the end of the course, they start rating strategies, like advanced congestion strategy was rated at 74% of ability to deliver the air quality index reduction from 135 micrograms per square cubic meter down to 67. So that's a good strategy. This isn't a good strategy. It delivers 0. See, I need to go back. And this is even worse strategy. It delivers -7%. So this is what engineers do. They look at the pluses and minuses. They look for negative, they look for side effects and negative side effects before they spend billions doing something. And that's part of what I'm encouraging people to do is don't just look at one dimension, you know, my strategy for my goal, but look for the team's strategies for the team's goals, okay? And that's something we don't do. But this table gives us the capability of looking at the big picture of all of the strategies. And you could even have a situation where some of these are IT strategies, some of these are non-IT strategies, and some of the goals are highly related to IT, some of them are not. But there still is a bigger picture of which IT is a component, okay? But long story short, tables like this give us an overview of what are all the impacts, including the costs of each and every major strategy. And based on that, we can make decisions like which strategy should we do early. Now, this is Agile. Which sprint should we do first? Of the question we can ask, but based on quantification of expected values and costs. Okay, there's too much of this, what I call one-dimensional thinking, where you know, it says we're going to get high security by using encryption or something like that. That's a one-dimensional thought. You'll notice that almost all of those United Nations statements were using the, this is the link word here. They were one-dimensional thinking. We're going to get some wonderful achievement using some fantastic strategy. Now, the problem is that's nice and simple, but the real world, there are many strategies we have to satisfy simultaneously. And there are many, this would be the strategies. And then there are many potential strategies for getting there. And you can't have this one-dimensional thinking. You've got to go for thinking in terms of a table of multiple strategies for multiple objectives and multiple costs. Numbers force us to think better and more clearly. Estimating how good things are is indeed difficult, but the option is spending £1 million finding out it doesn't work. Estimation might cost you £1,000, okay, and tell you it doesn't work and save you about £1 million. So the fact that estimation is difficult is just not an interesting argument compared to what is the option to estimating. And the answer is wasting a heck of a lot more time and money. If you Google failed IT projects and find that generally speaking, 40% are total failure and another 40% are highly challenged, we have a problem, Houston. We're not good enough at what we do. And I believe that the answer to the complex projects we almost invariably all are doing is to bring in engineering thinking and systems thinking. And that's what these methods are. And I think they will prevent some of the worst excesses and help us do Agile much better, okay, is what's going to happen here. Let me look at my watch. Okay, let's say I have at most about 10 more minutes, and but I'm getting pretty well through this. There's a section here on templates. Now, we've been using templates for decades to guide people into how should you specify, for example, a United Nations goal. And here's a template that says, well, you should give it a name, but a name isn't enough, like high sustainability, okay? But it's nice to have a name. And then the ambition level, that's what we're seeing in the United Nations statements, what I call ambition level, to get extremely high flexibility for poor people. Okay, but I write it down here in the ambition level, but I'm also teaching people, and I want you to understand that that's not good enough. That's full of ambiguous words. That is the official statement from your boss, from the CEO, from the UN, but that's not good enough for IT systems. I'm going to skip the fact that we need to identify stakeholders and analyze them, important enough, but we need to take this ambition level, the nice vision from the United Nations, and sit down and say, and now we're going to do the M in SMART. We're going to do the metrics. We're going to do the measurability. We're going to find a scale of measure, which means we can put numbers on how bad we are, the status, and how good we want to be, the wish level. And now we have clarified the nice sounding vision. Now we can hand this to the architect or designer and say, find me appropriate strategies that satisfy my wish level at the lowest possible costs. That you can't do that until you have quantified the level. That's not an option, that's a must for any serious works. So I'm going to give you my engineering handbook with language in it called Competitive Engineering. There's a free copy. By the way, if you want a paper copy, it'll cost you about 40 to 60 quid or something like that. But you're welcome to a digital copy. And there, by the way, is a tool called ValPlan, which we've been using for about 5 years on the BCS courses. And ValPlan automatically brings down templates and lets you add things to templates. That's why that's interesting there. But so I think I'll skip this. Here is the competitive engineering book. And here are simple templates. We traditionally have just put them into Word or downloaded them from a Word macro, but it's reminding people of good practice. Here's the ambition level. Here's the scale. Here's a reminder of how are we going to measure along that scale. Here are various benchmarks. Here are various constraints. Here are various targets. Here are various relationships. Here are various risk analysis things. So this template forces you to do a very mature requirements or objectives specification. And it's my way of doing SMART. And I think it's even smarter than normal SMART, but you can be the judge of that, okay? So here's some more templates. We long ago learned to make templates with hints, where we sort of built the instructions into the template. And so in Word or something, when you fill this out, you wipe out the instructions, but you've got the instructions right in front of you. So you don't need to go to a big fat book and find out what the heck am I supposed to do with a supra function. We built it in there. So that's a very smart, simple idea. Build the instructions into the template. Digitally, you can, wipe them out when you've done it, but you've got them there where you need them, when you need them, to remind people what they're expected to do. So how to evaluate IT strategies in relation to goals. Now, in a way, I've already given you a lot of information about it. And let's see, I've got order of magnitude 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most. But I'm going to, again, I'm show you something. This is actually from a lecture held, Margaret, at your BCS conferences. From the link is there from C and Ravinder Singh, and they did a project at the National Health Service for moving medicines from the hospital medicine cabinet to the patient. They also said it was a very successful NHS project, but they were using my methods for quantifying all their objectives and for evaluating all their strategies quantitatively. So there's a whole case study of doing that, and it's beautifully simple, but you can, read all about it. And I thought I'd give it as an example of, real NHS British stuff, okay? Making rough estimates on a table like that, once you've, learned to do it, is sometimes just 5 minutes or maximum an hour of work to get the first rough numbers there. It's not like you have to spend months researching and measuring and piloting to get numbers. The numbers, rough numbers, can be more than good enough to give you some idea of priorities and weak strategies and things like that. And if you need better quality numbers, well, you can decide that, and you can do the research necessary to get better numbers as you go along. But there's no question of getting perfect numbers. There's a question of getting some numbers, maybe plus minus 30%, plus minus 50%, immediately, and begin to think systematically and well structured about how good is this strategy in all of these dimensions. Here is from student work at BCS. We're working on the one of the projects there. The point I wanted to bring up there is slightly more advanced, but I'll throw it at you. I've got time to do that. Here's one of these intersections of a strategy and a quantified objective. And I showed you we could, estimate the power, the impact of this strategy on this objective. It reaches 70% of the goal. But if you click on this intersection, it opens a window where you can go into more detail, like, okay, so the impact is 7 minutes saving, but plus or minus how many, that's what we call the uncertainty. Here we can feed in the feedback from the sprint. In other words, what happened when we implemented this in the sprint. This is feedback and learning in Agile. And then we ask nasty questions like, you estimated 7 minutes, where'd you get that from? What's your evidence? Write it down, right there. And by the way, where'd you get your evidence from? Did you make it up on the fly? Is it a scientific wild-ass guess? Engineers call that a swag. Or can you reference maybe a URL to a paper with good research? And given the evidence and source of evidence, what is the quality, credibility of the evidence, where 0 means totally worthless estimates and 1.0 means almost perfect. You can be sure it's clear on the day. What we're doing here is we're handling risk of estimates and things being good or bad. There will be a mixture, so that when people are making decisions like what should we have as our first sprint, we can make decisions based on whether we've got weak or strong evidence for the estimates. We don't just buy into any number that people throw at us. Okay, so that's this is classroom work on the second day of a specialist group on quality course we held. Now, I think I should begin to wind down. There's something about decomposing large IT architectures. And one thing I've done, by the way, decomposition is the key to Agile. If anybody wants to go more deeply, which I don't have time to do, here's a freebie from my 700-page value planning book, which BCS declined to publish because it was too big. I'm still mad at them a little bit, but anyway, I'll have to give it to you for free. And here's a 70-page chapter on decomposition in detail for anybody who's interested in the subject. But decomposition means it's ultimately decomposition into small sprints so you can do Agile in clever ways. And I'd really like to talk more about it, but I don't want to talk much more over the 1 hour. Okay. Here's our Agile Cycle. So we've mainly looked at values and solutions. I hinted that we start with stakeholders. Once you've got a solution, if it's too big, you need to decompose it. So it's a sprint size, and then deliver it and measure how good it is, and evaluate what can we learn from this. And you continue doing this cycle until you have delivered all the values you decided to do for the United Nations sustainability goals and all of your other goals. But there's your, many of you will recognize a plan, do, study, act cycle from Deming and Shewart. And indeed, this is the same idea but they didn't have things like decompose and stakeholders. So we've added things we think are useful and desirable. And I'm sure you wouldn't get an argument from Deming, who I used to take to the Royal Opera House to see ballet and opera. True story. Okay, now I think I'm going to wind down and just skim and say, do I really want to overwhelm people with too much? And it's all about decomposition. And the good news is I'm not going to do it, but I have done it elsewhere. And so I won't do it. Nice stuff, but it would take another hour to get through it. So we won't worry too much about it. Here we are summarizing, I think it's next to last slide. The fact is there are many UN goals, and maybe many of them are appropriate for you. And then in any real project, you were going to have other goals in addition to the UN goals. And then you're going to have many solutions and many strategies. And so we need to learn to think about many at the same time, at least the top 10 goals and the top 10 strategies. That gives you a matrix of 100 relationships, 10 times 10. And we need to balance, that is, our solutions and strategies need to give us pretty good satisfaction of reaching our goals at time and price, which is realistic, budgets and deadlines, okay? And that really is the architecture engineering job. I have a separate book called Systems Engineering Architecture, and I'll give that to free for anybody who asks for it, okay? But by the way, here's another free chapter from the 700-page value planning book that BCS decided not to publish, called Prioritization, if you want to go into detail about dynamic multi-dimensional value prioritization. I hope that entices some people to study it. And let's see, okay, and let's see, there we go. I'm trying to get to the next and perhaps last slide. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that was the last slide. So competition between project goals, the UN goals themselves have an internal competition, and the other goals is unavoidable. They're all competing for the same pocket or purse at the very least, and they often have nasty side effects on each other. But an engineering process I've been describing gives you the opportunity to find reasonable balance with your IT strategies and maybe other corporate strategies for delivering them. And the tools I'm suggesting here, the quantification of the objectives and the quantification with the impact estimation table of how good the strategies are, will help you find that balance. So this is the last slide. You will find that the book, the free book on sustainability planning, you'll get from there. You might like to photograph this last one, or at least if you've got all the slides, you have it there, but tiny URL, UN Goals Gilb. And the lecture we held on this, about a 2-hour lecture, is there. And the video from the BCS SPA group is there, okay? So you can, so there's a whole 2 hours focused on that. This is where I was all day today. The view of the Oslo Fjord, that's my summer cabin and my pier. And there I am teaching a course, a 5-day workshop in Poland. And we've, by combining 2-day and 3-day courses, the BCS specialist group has managed to do 5-day workshop courses in London on the sly. Thank you so much, Margaret, for your sponsorship for that and the group. Okay, so I'm done. We have officially 19 minutes left and maybe a little bit more, but I'm done with the lecture and I'm open for questions. I'll leave this slide up a little bit more, but we can put the questions in the chat or ask them orally.
Tom, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of London, North London, Central London, Green IT Specialist Group, Quality Specialist Group, Hampshire branch, and basically everybody else for a fantastic presentation. And I'm going to ask you, before I'm going to hand across to Soya, who's going to deal with any questions that have been put in, so encourage people to put them in the chat. Could you send me the slides, set of slides, and I'll get them added onto the BCS website as well.
Okay.
People
So
can actually pick up the details.
yeah, right. So I'll send them again. I did send you and Dalim the URL, which is, by the way, here. Try to get rid of this.
In fact, that would be useful to leave that last slide up for a bit.
Yeah, I will. So these slides for this are, where are they? That's a good question. The slides for this are actually on the first slide. Okay, so right, sorry. There you go. So there's the QR for these slides. And the last slide then includes previous British Computer Society and other efforts to record me talking about sustainability and other related subjects. Yeah, so this is, you know, put your camera on the QR. I believe, Margaret, you'll find in your inbox, I have sent you this link.
Right, I wasn't sure whether I'd had the latest.
Yeah, well, what I did is I put, see, I put everything in a folder and I put the latest things in the folder.
Right,
So,
okay.
So you will hopefully find the latest version is 240321. In other words, 2 o'clock in the morning, my time. I was working on the last version of the slides. So that's the last version. If you, for any reason, have a problem. By the way, did anybody here already go and get these slides?
I did.
Good. Does it have on the title, this is my version number, you know, today's date 0152 or 32, yeah. That's the latest version. And there's a PowerPoint version and a PDF version of the slides in the folder.
Yes,
Now.
it does.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. If I pass across to Soya now.
I'm afraid I don't see any questions in the chat. Please, I mean, put your questions in the chat so we can ask Tom. But that was brilliant, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sohir.
I think a question's just turned up, I think, in the question and answer, Soya.
All right.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, here's an anonymous attendee. I'll read it. UN goals have different scales and complexity, yes, which means there are risks that we prioritize those that are easy to measure. Okay, I can deal with this question. over those that have the largest impact at the lowest cost. How do you manage this? Okay. Now, first, there's a concept here, easiest to measure. Now, let me make a long story short. My prioritization methods have no connection to the idea of easiest to measure. Okay, just full stop. And so I would say, don't worry about this. I'll tell you what I found. When people say easy to measure and difficult to measure, there are two concepts. First, there is easy to quantify. Means, can you develop a scale of measure? And people often mix these concepts. Remember Lord Kelvin's advice that if you think you know something about a subject, try to put a number on it and try to measure it. So in other words, try to quantify it and try to measure it. And if you can, you know something about the subject. If you don't, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. So we have to separate first the ease of quantification, and I'll define that very simply as putting a scale of measure on it. And then the ease of actual measurement, the feedback from the sprints, which is often called testing, and testing by measurement. And so there's a difference between how easy it is to quantify and how easy it is to measure. Now, here's the thing. Once you've got a quantification, a scale of measure, there are a very large number of potential testing methods or measuring methods, some of which are very easy to do and very cheap, but maybe don't give you the accuracy you want, and vice versa. Maybe the ones that give you an accuracy you'd love to have are a bit too costly. But long story short, we have to, the quantification itself does not determine the cost of measurement, and there's practically no cost at all in the quantification. Okay, the costs are actually in the measurement and the testing, which is up to you to design cheap enough measure that has sufficient accuracy. Now, if that answer isn't good enough, email me and I'll give you longer answers. But that's the gist of it. And I know that's a lot all at once, but I hope that shows you there is some kind of an answer to this, and I'm prepared to give it. And I've probably written it down quite a few places. In fact, I know I have. So if you ask me for a paper on measurement and quantification, I'll give you a paper, set of slides on measurement and quantification. Question answered as well as we can in a short session now. Thanks for it. A good question.
How do one align company values on SDGs in order to identify which of the SDGs will be useful in creating measurable sustainability goals for the company software products and services?
Oh goodness, the clarity of your speech so here wasn't perfect.
I know the computer is.
I'm not sure exactly every word.
If you look in the chat box, you can see the question.
Yeah, you know what? I'm looking around now. I can't.
I'm going to put it in.
Yeah, I can't see the chat box anywhere.
Okay. David, why don't you read the question?
Okay, so the question's from.
I'm going to stop sharing. Maybe that will give me a chat box with a bit of luck. Here was maybe going to put it in there. So I'm still looking for the chat box. I'm in Zoom.
Don't worry, we're all here to support you.
Yeah, good. Now I can see the chat box. I had to stop sharing to do it, and I didn't even know that. Thank you. Is this okay, I've got the question. Excuse me. How does one align company values to sustainable development goals in order to identify which of the goals will be useful in creating measurable sustainability goals? Okay, now, goodness me. So it's a multi-part question. Let me get to the core of it. Right. Okay. Good question. Okay, so let's pick a random sustainability goal, which has 1,001 possible interpretations. But your company is like the National Health Service. take an example. And so the question is, what are you going to do for innovation in national health services? Okay. And I think what's going to happen is somebody has to take a look at that goal and say, we are the National Health Service, therefore we're not going to do production of wheat, you know, or anything else like that. We're going to do stuff that National Health Service does, which has to do, of course, with medicine and treatment and stuff like that. That's the first subset. And then you might take another look at it and say, we actually have funded research projects in certain areas already. So we're going to do those things because they're already funded. Okay, what you're doing is you have to narrow in on the very broad scope of the UN goals by just using your domain knowledge of who you are and what you do. So that's the simple answer. And then from that, you will derive a goal, you know, which is something about, could be about spreading our research to the all countries in the world on a weekly basis for the innovative things we do. And that's, you know, maybe goal number, I think it's goal number 9 or something like that, innovation. That's a rough cut, but let me simplify again. You take a look at the extremely broad goal of the UN and you say, who are we and what do we do? And that is your subset that you need to formulate a goal for. I hope that helps, Shola, at least beginning. And if not, you've got my email up there on my screen. And if you say, okay, Tom, I got a little bit, but I still have further questions, you're welcome to write me an email, which will probably be answered this evening, if you write this evening, and give me further question and I'll write you further answer. So good. Now, let's see, Ian Jones and Shola, yeah, Ian Jones has one. Shall I take that one? Yeah, I think so. In the example 8.2 economic goals, aren't the strategies a legitimate part of the goal, even if they're clumsily written? And I'd say, no, they are not. They are an extremely bad and dangerous practice of specifying a strategy for an unclear goal and of constraining everybody in the world to that one strategy when there clearly are a very large number of other better strategies for many people. So it's quite simply an illegitimate way of writing goals, and the UN should stop it. It's an extremely bad practice. I will be happy, I've argued that in detail in the sustainability planning book, which you have a free copy of, and I will argue it in writing to anybody who thinks it's a good idea, anytime. But I've tried to give my arguments right now. You cannot, nobody can logically decide that a strategy is a good or right strategy if they haven't even got a clear, quantified, agreed official objective. It's logically impossible. If that isn't clear, I invite you to read the competitive engineering book and the sustainability planning book and the value planning book, and I'll give you a few more books on the subject. This is the second part of the question. If the goal is reduced only to economic growth that can be realized in non-sustainable ways, which is not the intended outcome. That's a whole sentence, and it doesn't actually, I don't get it to mean anything. If the goal is reduced to economic growth, well, it's a possibility. That can be realized only yeah, well, then you've got nothing you can do, I guess, sustainably. But I think that question needs to be reformulated, Ian, and you're welcome to reformulate and spit it to me at tom@gilb.com. How's that? Anything else that's come in?
Another one
Ian?
from Shola.
Yeah, is there a second one from Shola? Okay. Oh yeah, for companies without sustainability values, where do they start from if they're interested in sustainability values as a guide for sustainability and okay. Now, actually, you have to start from the UN sustainability goals. They are on, all you need to do is Google it. You'll get the United Nations official websites with all the goals. What I'm doing, I'm warning you that there's a lot of fluff and fuzziness and visionariness there, which is not good enough for any ICT systems design development area. They're good enough as a vision, as a starting point, and I think that is their intent. You are going to have to do what I've been talking about, like, make it into a SMART goal, to put it really simple, well understood terms. You have to make it more specific and something you can deal with. In other words, you start by picking something in the vision that appeals to the heart of your institution or company. Just we can start with any one goal. Goal number one is fight hunger. And if that, and maybe you're in the food business, maybe you're Sainsbury's, and maybe you can fight hunger by giving your products you don't want to sell for free to somebody, okay? And so that's your goal to work on. Okay, so you start with goals that you can conceivably deal with. So somebody has to scan the 17 and say, number 2 and number 8 are stuff we can deal with. And according to Tom, what Tom is trying to do is we need to pick the subset of those goals that are our stuff that we can deal with. We need to clarify that. That's how you start. Okay? And then you need to get these goals approved by the people who have budgets for your project, that they buy into it. And if you have a clear goal, it's easier for them to see what they're buying into. You should never ask for budget and political support from people based on a vague goal. If they're smart at all, they should say, I refuse to say yes because I don't know what I'm saying yes to. Although not all managers are that smart. You can fool them with vague goals.
There is one from Daniel, which I'm going to unmute him. It's not allowing me to unmute Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel.
I've just
Go ahead,
unmuted him.
Okay.
Okay, Daniel, I'm listening.
Okay, I don't know why he's got his hand up then. It's not seeming to do anything.
Okay. Now, by the way, we've reached the 1.5 hour announced time limit, didn't we?
We have, Tom, and it's time for me to raise my hand and say, that's great. So if it's okay with everyone, let's pause. And I say pause deliberately because Tom has very generously, as usual, opened his door and allowed us lots of access to send him questions and to seek his advice and help on other subjects. That is most appreciated, Tom, and also your long and very generous association with the FBCS. I am really, really pleased that you are not only clear of cancer, but your thought processes are all working so magnificently. So naturally,
I'm 80 years old and proud of it.
exactly, and absolutely. So you set yourself up completely for me to say, Tom Gilb, when are you going to write your UN sustainability goals a la Tom Gilb version, so that we can all understand far better things that we can do in our IT world?
By the way, if anybody's got some really good connections and the UN invited me to help them write clearer goals, I would say yes and work for free. Did you hear me, United Nations bureaucrats?
Okay, I'm not sure there are any on the call, but if we have those contacts, then please do reach out to them and reach out to Tom, and let's get that happening. As usual, Tom, it's been a pleasure to hear you, to see you. I know you've given us about a small mountain of printable material if we wish to print it free, and I'm sure some of that will be digested and made use of. Tom, thank you so much. We've extended our thanks to you, and also I hope you're going to be selecting a BCS book. Or Margaret, we're more generous than your offer. We usually offer a couple of ebooks, but you've dived in and made the offer. I hope you'll take that up and we'll carry on. And remember, we do want to see something, but the UN sustainability goals from you in practical terms. Thanks very much, everybody, for attending. Hope you've enjoyed the evening and look forward to seeing you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
All the specialist groups for sponsoring this. Bye-bye, so here. Margaret, good to see your pictures. David, thank you. Okay.